Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of From the Desk of Precious Swain. Today, we'll be talking to Vondell. Vondell has gone from homelessness to an extreme hope in his community, leading the way with information, resources, and the mayor has even given him a key to the city. But we're going to let him tell you a little more about himself. Hello, how are you?
Thank you for that introduction, Precious. I'm so excited to be here. So I just want to say hello to you and to your viewers.
Tell us about homelessness is a roller coaster of emotion.
So the 40,000 square foot view, Precious, and I love it. You shared it. Is that I share with people. I went from homelessness to holding a key to the city of Clarksville, Tennessee, which was voted Money Magazine's best place to live, the #1 place to live in 2019. But my journey didn't always start there. So I was a young pup down in Guthrie, Oklahoma. Yeah, my father's from Oklahoma, my mother's from Mobile, Alabama, and they met at Job Corps. And at about 7 years of age, they had a breakdown in their relationship, in their marriage, which led to a divorce. My mom and, myself, we left, and she would move us to Mobile, Alabama. And I grew up in the projects on Ann Street in Mobile, Alabama with my mother, my grandmother, and my Aunt Janet. So I was in the Scouts as a young man, worked my way from Cub Scout to Weeblos to Boy Scout, quickly establishing myself as a leader, apparently. They would always tell me that. Then mom remarried around 8th grade. Mom remarried and we moved to Germany, which was the beginning of my 9th grade year. So I always have to remember I started high school in a foreign country. She married a soldier. My stepdad was in the military. We moved over to Germany. I learned the language, lived there 3 years, and I had an amazing time, Precious, as I started school in a different country, learning a new language. And this is a cool fact. Most military kids go to what's called a DOD school, Department of Defense school. I had the unique pleasure of going to an international school, which put me in classes with kids from Spain, Africa, China, Japan, Italy. And so it was so amazing, Germany. And so it was really enlightening. And then about junior year, we moved back stateside and we landed here in Tennessee at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, which is the 101st Airborne. I finished up high school. By this time I was and then started my college journey. And from there, went to one school, transferred, wasn't making the grade, had less than a 2.0 GPA my first 3 years of college. Didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't so dumb or stupid or partying. I just didn't have a clue. I was ignorant. And so transferred from a school here in Tennessee, Austin Peay State University, to North Carolina A&T State University. Aggie pride to all my HBCU alums. Graduated with honors. So praise God, I went from barely having a 2.0 to being able to graduate with honors, and got a BFA in acting directing. So life was going on. Then I went to grad school, had a momentary stop down at the University of Florida for 1 year, which was my Damascus Road. I gave my heart to Christ while I was there, and I transferred not once, but twice now. And I'm in grad school going to Rutgers. So there I am at Rutgers. Graduated again with my Master of Fine Arts in Theater, acting. So I have 2 degrees, one in acting, directing, one in acting. I started putting life together, one foot in front of the other as a professional, pounding the pavement on one end, teaching classes at another end. And right around 2008, we all know what happened. 2006, let me backtrack a second. 2006, invested in my first home. Was so proud of myself, working and serving in ministry in New Jersey. And 2 years, not knowing 2 years later what was waiting for us. We look back now and we know, but in 2006, we had no clue. There was rumors of this bubble. And yes, it was real. So 2006, shortly after closing on my first home, was laid off, and just struggled to find consistent full-time employment after that. And then just next thing I know, I got the email, the letters in the mail saying, hey, Mr. Richmond, you're not making your mortgage payment. And we all know what happens from there.
Yeah.
Relocated, tried to go do some things. But in the short of the long was I just lost my home. I lost my home, lost my car, had some major health issues around the time. Spontaneous. I went through all the books of the Bible at one time in that season. Joseph, Job, all of them. And so anyway, I was homeless, and not on the street homeless. And that was something I struggled with. Is it fair for me to say I was homeless? But then I realized homelessness even has tiers to it. According to the textbook definition, I was considered homeless, and I was living from sofa to sofa with family and friends. And they said, hey, that's the end of the meals for you. We're tired, whatever it was. Nothing serious. It was just, we can't support you beyond this. I had to find somewhere else to go. And then finally, and the reason I was doing that, I wasn't just sort of mooching off people. I was really saying, okay, I was working here for this amount of time. So I need to move with this particular family member. Like I moved to Florida to try to launch a church with my pastor's son, and some things just happened with the church launch. And so it was all kind of craziness. Around 2016, I just said, Lord, I'm tapping out. I'm going home. And I had to call Mom, make that humbling call and say, Mom, I need to come home for a season. You know what's going on. The job situation left and right was acting crazy. And so, I came back to Tennessee, and that's where I've been planted. Praise God, in 2017, I was able to launch out on my own, get back on my feet, and here we are.
A lot of people don't realize that there's tiers to homelessness. Homelessness is just you're on the street with a cardboard. They don't realize the sofa surfing, or even the I'm asleep in my car in someone's driveway because that's a safe place. Can you kind of explain to the audience how you dealt with the mental aspect of it?
And it does play a mental part. And because it was my first time going through it, I had no clue, Precious. The first part of it started with the threat of that letter, Mr. Richmond, you're losing your home, from the mortgage company. I think that's the beginning of the tip of the iceberg. You think, okay, what am I going to do? And so, of course, the first crisis response is, I've got to find money to save my home. So there was that season where I remember clearly sitting in my condo, thinking through what's going to happen to me. Literally, I was trying everything. I started network marketing in that season. I was trying to launch every skill that I had to get some kind of consulting contract. And we know how it was. Everybody was just pretty much like, we don't have work. Our government funding got cut. Their grant monies got cut. Contracts got cut. Employment got cut. So everybody was sort of shutting doors and trimming the fat, if you will. I went into a season of prayer to say, okay, where do I need to pivot in all of this? And literally, that's where the idea to move to Florida came from, to relocate, get from under it. I talked to some counselors and mentors of mine who said, Vondell, the last thing you want is for you to stay there, them come after you for that mortgage. Even if you lose the home, you don't want to be on the hook for that large sum of mortgage on the back end. So get from under it and just start over. So with that wisdom, that's where it started. And I launched down to Florida to help with this church plant. And I was supposed to be staying with a professor of mine who lived in West Palm Beach, and the church plant was in Orlando. But I called my buddy and said, hey, man, I don't know if you knew, but West Palm is like 3-4 hours away from Orlando. This ain't no commute. This is like a trip. This is a journey. It's several tanks of gas. And so he assured me, being a brother in Christ, and I don't hold anything against him. We were just at the time doing it for what we thought. But he was a young dad, a young husband. He was my pastor's son. And he said, man, you with family. Come on, V. And the plan was I would stay with him temporarily until I found an apartment. And I had, at that point, Precious, I had rented out a room in my condo back in Jersey to a member of the church, just for a very nominal fee, something to help this individual out. And then that would get me a few coins to be able to kind of do what I needed to do in Florida. And as they know, Murphy's Law, when it rains, it pours. I move in with him, and the second month of her rent payment or the arrangement due, she stopped paying. There I am. I've given someone else the keys to my home, wrote the agreement out. So I just want to be clear with everybody to say, like, it wasn't like what were you thinking? But I wrote an agreement on paper, handed the keys to a friend and said, hey, if there's ever any need, you have the permission to go in. My stuff is in my office, locked up in my second bedroom. This rest of the space is yours. This is hers to enjoy. And she stopped paying rent. There I was now in a rock between a hard place in a new city, new environment with church family, but then no income whatsoever. So that left me emotionally in like this awkward space of feeling like I'm not able to contribute. In that moment, I felt very dependent again. So it was no longer that I was interdependent, working with them. I felt very dependent on him, to say like, oh man, I'm kind of relying on whatever he and his family can provide at this particular time. So there was a lot of emotional stuff that I dealt with in terms of, let me just stay in my room. Let me stay out the way, playing small. Let me not rock the boat, if you will, because I want to be a good house guest. After they finish eating, let me go, go down and see like what's left over, if anything, so it was a lot of that. And I remember going out to look for jobs during the day. My goal was to stay out until it was time to go to bed. So yes, you're right. There was a lot of sitting in my car midday, going to Barnes and Nobles, looking through want ads, and I remember it got very tense one time because in his opinion, he thought because I had degrees, I thought I was above working at like a retail outlet like a Ross or a Walmart. And I said, no, man, I got 2 degrees. When I come through the door, they're just looking at me going, okay, why do you want to work here? Number one, I'm overqualified, and we're in a college town, man. Those hourly wage jobs went to the college kids, and we were in the middle of a Christmas season. So they had already hired for their staff for Christmas. So me showing up in November, December, they don't care. And then after the holiday season, they're like, we're getting rid of all those students because they're going back to school and we don't really need any new people. So it was that kind of catch-22 that I was in, being in a new city, learning, networking, setting myself up. And what I did in that season, Precious, was just kind of hit my network marketing company real hard, you know, trying to say, okay, this will give me a chance to meet people, invite people to the church, and get contacts to find meaningful work. Then I went from his place, I think it was Thanksgiving holiday, I went to that professor's house. So I had to drive 4 hours away because he and his family were going back to New Jersey to visit his family. And they were like, you can't stay here while we're gone. And it was shocking because, you know, here's a brother who lived next door to me in the condo complex back in Jersey and trusted me with everything. But now we're in Florida and some things seem a little weird and what's going on. But you just never know what people are dealing with on their own. Yeah. And so you have to respect whatever rules because they're the key holders and the rent payers and the mortgage payers, and you have to respect their wishes. So now I had to drive 4 hours away, which disrupted my employment momentum that I was gaining, my interviewing in the midst of a holiday. And I had to trek 4 hours to this. So now I'm in West Palm for holidays. He and I have a talk and he's like, hey, what's going on? My stuff is at his place. Some of my stuff is in Orlando. Most of my stuff is in West Palm. And he's like, you know, and this professor of mine, again, I used to stay with him in the summers when I was an undergrad. He's now a bit older. He may be losing some of his faculties. He had a nephew he was supporting who was kind of a negative, like he stole from this person and everything. So I don't know how much of it mentally he was aware that I wasn't his nephew, that, you know, short of the long, Precious, is that he asked me, he said, hey, how long are you going to be here? Because at this particular season, some other friends of his for the holidays were coming in. So now I'm like, okay, well, after this, I got to go back to Orlando. So I go back to Orlando and then Christmas comes up and we go through this cycle again.
All over again.
So, yeah. So fortunately, my property manager who knew about all of this was next door to Orlando in Windermere, which is right outside of Disney. And he said, man, let me talk to my wife. You can come crash here for the Christmas holiday because we went through that same process. Hey, man, me and the wife going back to Jersey. Where you going to go? I said, man, listen, you know, I have some real big interviews with software company coming up. I need to be in place. I can't tell them, well, I can't do the interview. They're gonna be like, all right, next candidate. Went to stay with this good friend, had an amazing time. I was very comfortable in that space. Went back to my buddy's house and we had to have shortly after Christmas that hard conversation. Mm-hmm. Hey man, top of the new year. His parents were coming from New Jersey and they're want to stay in the extra room. It's like, okay, this is my pastor. This is his place and that's his parents. Yeah. So here we go a third time saying, okay, what am I going to do? And the only place I had to go, Precious, at that time was I had family in Jacksonville, my grandmother and my aunt. So I had to literally pack my car, another version of my stuff, and drive to Jacksonville. And at this point, I was driving an '06 Maxima. Like I said, when it rains, it pours. On the highway, something with the timing chain was going whack. Had no problem with the car up to this point. All I had to do was change the oil. And all of a sudden, something with the timing belt, which is deep in the engine, which costs thousands of dollars to get into the transmission, goes wrong. And I remember it stalled on the highway, maybe 20 minutes away from my aunt's house. Just let me make it to Jacksonville, please, please. And I remember sitting on the side of the highway praying, literally. And maybe 20 minutes later, trying the car, and I did it. It made it to Jacksonville, just on the side of my aunt's house. And that's where I would go through a whole nother season. So now I'm at my aunt's house in Jacksonville. So I'm going, I don't know this neck of the woods. It looks a lot different than Orlando. Orlando and Windermere was like the promised land and paradise. I got to Jacksonville and I was like, oh my God, it looks ashy down here. Remember being in that spare bedroom. Thank God my aunt had it. I remember having a really heart-to-heart with God. And maybe I'm going through this because I remember looking at my bank account and I had like $13 in my account. And I remember saying to myself, I just have a question. I'm not complaining. I just have a question because I want to see a way out of this. How is it that at the time, I think I was in my late 30s. I'm in my late 30s. My mother's in her 50s and 60s. Excuse me. My grandmother's in her 80s and 90s, both sets of grandparents. You know, so I'm counting up the generations. And I said, okay, God, I come from a family of faith believers, you know, people saying, we trust you, God. We sow seed, believe for ROI in terms of quote unquote harvest, spiritual harvest and that sort of thing. Although I know we got to do some practical things, but I said, Lord, this makes no sense. Like, how is it that there's probably over 100+ years of serving you, sowing into the kingdom, and in my family as a whole, at least the ones that I'm this close to, there doesn't seem to be any assets or any ownership of anything to where I can pick up a phone and say, hey, Uncle so-and-so, hey, Auntie so-and-so, I hit a hard time. Can I come file papers in your your company or whatever, your store? Can I sweep up the back? Can I take out the trash to your barbershop? There's nothing that I can't call in any favors like that. And I thought, never again. And that's when it hit me, the plight of a lot of our community, one micro hair away from a major breakdown. Like if everything has to work, because when it starts to deteriorate or someone experiences a crisis, we, unfortunately, a lot of us don't have the resources to be able to support in that particular situation. We've got to begin to get our economic and financial houses in order the same way we focus on our spiritual and faith houses. You know what I mean? Like in some very practical ways. I knew enough and had been exposed to enough to say, you know what I can't afford with this $13? A URL, a domain on the internet. And I went and purchased a domain on the internet to say, I'm going to build me something, an e-commerce store. I'm going to build something here with this domain. And so that's what I did. I took that $13 and I purchased the domain. And that's where I hosted my coffee shop at the time, which began to generate some income. It was off to my next journey. So at that point, I got a letter saying that my property, which had been marketed, it was a short sale. I remember having a conversation with my family, and my mom said, well, we can help you if you need to come back to either here to Tennessee at the time, or if you want to go to Jersey because you have more contacts there. And I said, Mom, I appreciate that, helping out with that plane ticket. And I said, I think I want to go back to Jersey. My network was there. I could get around. My church home was there. So I knew more people. So I said, I'm going to go there. I think they're going to sell the property with the renter in it. My plan at the time is that I want to go talk to that renter and say, hey, is it okay if I move back in and I'll pay you rent? Like, you can own it all you want. I just need a place to live. And that was the plan. I thought, I had a friend at the time. And I said, hey, can I stay with your sister and brother who owned a house next door to her? And I said, I want to, rent the room from them. And then it hit me with what? Like, you don't have any money. Can I crash on your couch while I come back to Jersey to go to court to fight this woman? I shouldn't be there for no more than a week or something, me just green and ignorant. So this friend was like, sure, I'll pick you up from the airport. Yeah, you can crash for a week. And it turned out I was there for a year. That New Jersey apparently is the safest place you can live if you are a squatter or if the landlord-tenant laws. Indirectly, I was thrown into being a landlord. I knew one thing. I didn't want to move in with that person because I didn't want either the tension of them to blame me for doing something as a Black man. We had, just to clear up the air, we had no kind of romantic ties or anything like that. It was strictly a member of the church I was, in my mind, doing a service for. I moved back to New Jersey, crashing on a friend's sofa, going to court to say, hey, how do I handle this? I've never been through this. We worked it out in what I thought to be mediation, because I thought, you know what, I don't want to take this person in front of the judge. I don't want this person to incur any other thing than what I felt like the agreement was. So I went to mediation to, in my mind, resolve it before going to the judge. The person came to court all late. And so anyway, so they agreed they would start paying. And so that was the agreement of the mediation. And they paid about another 1 or 2 times and went back to their old ways. I worked at the Javits Event Center, checking tickets when people came. And that was very rewarding. I felt value again as an employee. Plainfield to New York is quite a bit. So how do I move closer to New York? And at the time, I moved with another friend. And there's a young lady that I think that I was dating at the time. She moved into a spare room, and then I moved into the third spare room because their other roommate moved. And so now here we are saying, okay, I'm closer to New York, so I'm spending $6 or $7 as opposed to $22 each way. And so I can keep a little bit more of what I'm bringing home on my part-time income. And here we go. Let's put it together. So now I'm at third or fourth location. My buddy moved out of the room. So I talked to them about renting the room because now I had this job. And by this time, Precious, I was applying to be a substitute teacher, because I was like, okay, I can sub, make some money. And that's what I started doing. And then all of a sudden, I came to visit home. Let me call this person, find out whether they're going to charge me for rent, because I had planned to borrow the money from my stepfather, knowing that I would now be working, teaching as a sub. And this person said, I don't want to live with a couple. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, we're working on moving towards matrimony. You guys were roommates and you guys have a contract. The young lady and I had met in school and known each other for a number of years. We had started dating, and then the next day she called back and said, well, how much you gonna pay for rent? I said, no. You already saying you want to live with a couple. But I think she thought about the financial part, because now she's gonna lose two potential roommates, and she got to figure that rent out. And I said, no, you already made your decision. I said, we're fine. So anyway, moved back, helped the young lady I was dating move out at the time, and moved in her own space. I said, hey babe, at the time, let me crash on your sofa.
Oh goodness!
Till I come up with my next version of my plan, of doing part-time work and still subbing. I think the temp gig had stopped at this point. Now I'm just subbing. A buddy of mine called and said, hey, there's a startup company, insurance company, Oscar Health. They're looking. At this point, I had borrowed the money from my parents to come back to Tennessee. They said, here's a U-Haul, enough for a U-Haul to get you back home. And I now had that fork in the road, Precious. Do I stay in Jersey with this startup company, or do I move back to Tennessee? So I thought about it. I got the job, which was a contract at a health insurance company. So for a 6-month contract, it's paying pretty decent money for a homeless guy at this point. And they were going to get me to my insurance. And so that's meaningful income, stack away in my savings, or just throw that to the wind and move back to Tennessee, which I don't know what's there. So I talked to, the young lady I was dating. I said, babe, listen, I know I'm supposed to move, but I just, if I stay here, this is what this means. I have to stay crashing on the couch and stuff, just one studio efficiency, which I don't want to do. God knows I don't want to shack. I want to do right by you, our parents, God, us, And she said, okay, well, all right. So if you want to stay here, you're going to take that job. Okay, that's what we're doing. I said, okay. And then we'll come up and create a plan, as we're moving forward. So took the job, Precious. They gave me my license. I'm like, okay, some breathing room. So here's my contribution. This is what I can afford based on my budget and based on what I'm doing to try to make a plan. We're rolling right along. Things did start turning around, Precious. I then moved into a coaching. So I fulfilled that 6-month contract. It ended in February of 16. I'll never forget. You never forget these dates. And then we lose her mother.
That's life. We need the pain to fuel our purpose. Looking at the things going on in today's society, with your experience of what you've been through, what would you tell young people today to do to prepare themselves to not fall in that situation?
First of all, like we said at the top of the question, it's called life. We can't outwit life. The advice that I would give to prepare is to know that winter is coming. Teach your young person, your young leader, because that's what they are, that they are a leader. They have everything that they need already that needs to be developed and sharpened for them to be able to make quick decisions when crises in life come their way. And so what is it that we can equip our young people with to help them be able to defend themselves? Biblically, we read all kinds of proverbs that say, wisdom is a defense. To everything there comes a season. So knowing that everything there is a season, those areas of my story that there were gaps, meaning I didn't know really what to do, like that portion when I was saying, no one talked to me about this, and I hadn't had, mom couldn't tell me about home ownership because she never dealt with it. But mom, surely as a single mom, had her version of that, the divorce. God forbid of divorce, whatever hit your life, son. But when something of that magnitude shifts you circumstantially in a different direction, here's the financial conversation you need to be prepared to have with yourself and be prepared to deal with, because looking back, mom had to come up with two Greyhound bus tickets at the time. She had to figure out, okay, my husband is not going to be providing for me and my child any longer. She had to figure out, okay, how am I going to have that job when I get back to Mobile, staying with her mom at the time? So many things that I think that if we prepare our young people, whether that be to say we're going to have a savings of some sort and some other financial vehicles. So now I see the importance of what, one of the principles that Dave Ramsey and people like that talk about is having that 3 to 6 month savings set to the side. I had also paid off some of my debt. I think that to prepare a young person with some of those emotional assets and those faith-based assets to know who the real source is. Deacon Vondell just rose up, but to prepare the young person to understand who and what the real source is. I know we can get back into debates about, respecting other faiths, but my faith, my Christian faith, I just want to be clear, in Christ was my foundation, and whatever that looks like for you. I recommend Jesus, try him, but if not, whatever faith, respective to your household and your family's values, I would say tap into that seriously. Being transparent and vulnerable, the worst thing that could have happened to me in the midst of all of that is for me to implode, or to be able to just transparently say to somebody, hey, I'm hurting. I think a lot of mental breakdown and emotional breakdown starts internally and then manifests itself. So by the time, unfortunately, that Robin Williams takes that drastic of an action, there's a whole lot of inner volcanoes that have erupted and things that have happened, floods that have sunken and depressed him to such a place that we unfortunately just see the manifestation of the final decision that he made.
What is a good way that the audience could reach you?
You can just Google my name. It's there on the screen, Vondell Richmond. You can put me in Facebook. And I have just 2 pages. I have one in a red sweater for now, and another one is my business page. So you can reach me there. If you really feel bold and want to reach me directly, you can text me. It's 931-322-4902. That comes directly to me. You can text me and say, hey, I have a question, or, how do I get on Precious's show? And I'll introduce you to her. You can just go to campsite.bio / my first name, Vondell. So campsite.bio / Vondell. And there's a number of links there that you can learn more about my story more in depth.
It has been such an amazing, amazing time. And I would like to extend the offer to have you on the show again. And I thank you so much for taking the time to come on today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Precious. And to your listeners, thank you for their time as well.
We have come to the end of another episode. This one was really deep, and it talked a lot about not giving up and understanding your seasons. At Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. To everything there is a season, a time to every purpose under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to get and a time to loose, a time to guard and a time to cast away, a time to rend and a time to sow, a time to keep silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time to war and a time of peace. There's an ordained time for everything. For everything, there is a season. And sometimes what seems to be so good is only seasonal to prepare you for something else. And sometimes things that are so bad are also seasonal to prepare you for the good things that are coming. And thank you for tuning in for another episode of From the Desk of Precious Swain.